This is Audio Visceral. Audio Visceral presents Sherlock Holmes and the Runestone Mystery, written by Larry Millett and performed by Steve Hendrickson.
The book you are about to read recounts the third adventure of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson in Minnesota, following on the heels of Sherlock Holmes and the Red Demon and Sherlock Holmes and the Ice Palace Murders. One of the central themes of this newly discovered adventure is what Watson calls the power of coincidence and its unpredictable role in human affairs. Coincidence, as it turns out, is also very much a part of the story behind the discovery of the long-lost manuscript for Sherlock Holmes and the Runestone Mystery. The story begins in the spring of 1899 when Holmes and Watson were drawn to western Minnesota to investigate the so-called Hollenberg runestone, a highly controversial artifact that had been unearthed several months earlier on a farm not far from its namesake village. Among the people Holmes and Watson may well have encountered on their visit was a newspaperman named Albert Carlson. Although mentioned only briefly in the Runestone Mystery, Carlson wrote extensively about the case for his newspaper, The Clarion, published in the town of Alexandria, just a few miles from Hollenberg. More important for the purposes of history, Carlson also came into possession of what is now the only known copy of Sherlock Holmes and the Runestone Mystery, which Watson appears to have completed sometime toward the end of 1901. Exactly how Carlson obtained the manuscript is a mystery, since neither his will nor any other document he left behind after his death mentions the manuscript. Nor is there anything in Dr. Watson's papers at the British Museum that would shed light on the issue. Absent any firm evidence, it is only possible to guess how the manuscript found its way to Carlson. The most likely scenario, which admittedly qualifies as little more than rank speculation, is that Watson sent the manuscript to one of the principals in the case, several of whom lived in Alexandria, and that at some point, perhaps not until many years later, this person in turn gave it to Carlson. Watson, of course, was a tireless writer who devoted himself to chronicling the many adventures of his dear friend Sherlock Holmes. The great detective, however, did not always share the good doctor's enthusiasm for memorializing their cases through the written word. It is thus well known that some of the duo's most celebrated cases, the tantalizing affair of the giant rat of Sumatra being one notable example, were never committed to paper by Watson, presumably because of objections on Holmes's part. In other instances, Watson wrote up an adventure knowing all the while that its publication would inevitably be delayed, perhaps for decades, because of the sensitive nature of the investigation. Such seems to have been the case with the Runestone Mystery, even though the events it describes were well publicized by newspapers and magazines of the time. I have found references to the case in such major newspapers as the Chicago Tribune, the New York Sun, and...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?